It began with a single alert on their phones. An unknown AirTag is moving with you. They thought it was nothing, until they realized someone was tracking every move they made. A woman alone on a dark road, a stranger in a crowded restaurant, a family being followed home. 3 real stories, 1 terrifying truth. They weren't tracking things. They were tracking people. You're watching Nazir Fears, where every story is real and every fear is earned. Subscribe now. Hit the bell icon so you never miss the next true horror that could happen to anyone, even you. Story 1. The passenger that didn't breathe. Eleanor Steele didn't notice the extra beat in the car until the night got quiet enough to hear it, a faint tick under the floorboards that sounded like a heartbeat learning English. And by the time she realized she was alone on the toll road to Brighton, the alert pinged on her phone. An unknown item is moving with you. She almost laughed because it felt like one of those paranoid warnings the city gave out when the streetlights flickered. But the dot on her map kept jumping with her speedometer, hugging her blue route like a shadow that had paid for the ride. She was coming back from staging a townhouse in Chelsea. Fake lemons in a bowl, copies of long-dead poets stacked on nightstands. And her ex, Oliver, had texted an hour ago a blur of apologies that began with, "I know I messed up," and ended with, "I miss our routines," a phrase so tragically British it felt like an obituary for mornings. The tick was getting louder with the road's ripple, and Eleanor pulled off at a petrol station between a shuttered little chef and a car wash that looked like a cathedral for ghosts. And then she did something she'd never done in a place like that at midnight. She got out and crouched. The night air smelled like old rubber and tarmac. Moths behaved like broken punctuation in the station's blue light. She ran her hands along the bumper, felt under the wheel arch, tapped a knuckle against the exhaust where cold liquid slid down like tears from metal. And then she saw it, a coin-sized pearl with a keyring lip, taped into the crevice behind her rear number plate with the kind of tidy care you reserve for gifts and bombs. She didn't touch it, she just stood there, hands hovering, feeling her name get thinner in her throat. The map pulsed again. Unknown item last seen with you. She backed away and took a photo because women know courts prefer pictures to fear. And then she got back into her car and locked the doors and called her brother Arthur, who swore in a whisper because his wife was asleep. And he said, "Drive here now." And she said, "What if someone's following?" And he said, "Good." And she thought that was either courageous or stupid, and possibly both. She pulled onto the A27, letting lorries become guards around her, big metal shepherds whose drivers had no idea they were making the night safer by doing nothing at all. In the rear view, a black Ford kept its distance like a polite stalker. Every time she changed lanes, it did too, a few seconds after, as if learning choreography. Eleanor remembered that Oliver had put the baby seat into her boot once, back when they were playing at futures neither of them could afford. And she tried to imagine him as the villain she'd refused to believe in, the kind that read articles about technology for peace of mind, and then stapled those articles into rationalizations. The Ford inched closer. The tick seemed inside her now, nested under her ribs like an egg. She turned off early, not toward her brother's, but toward a police station she remembered from a parking ticket. And the Ford followed, still patient, still modest, until she swung at the last second into a lane marked with yellow chevrons and tears, and the Ford overshot, brake lights flaring red like a swallowed scream, then vanished. In the fluorescent lobby, Eleanor's story sounded absurd to her own ears. The taped device, the map, the Ford, the neatness of it all, like a plot auditioning for a detective who was running late. But the officer, a woman whose badge said SGT, R. Morley, didn't laugh. She took the phone, pressed play sound, and they went outside into the station car park, where the device chirped like a tiny bird that had learned only one note. "It's here," Morley said, and together they found it, taped clean as a surgical bandage, sheening in the sodium lights. "We'll bag it," Morley said, and Eleanor asked the only question that mattered. "Can you tell who it belongs to?" The sergeant's mouth moved, but careful. Sometimes, she did not say often, she did not say yes. They made a report, took her statement, and when Eleanor finally left, close to 2 in the morning, one eye on the rear view, one on the map that now lay still, she realized fear had an aftertaste like metal and milk, and it clung to ordinary objects. Her keys, her handbag, the fake lemons in the boot rolling and thumping softly. She pulled into her brother's quiet cul-de-sac and sat with the engine off, listening for the tick that wasn't there. And on her phone, a new message arrived from an unknown number, a single emoji, a winking face that looked less like a flirtation now and more like a sealed envelope with a grin. Eleanor blocked the number, turned the phone off, And in the suffocating silence, she finally understood the worst thing about being hunted by something small. It teaches you to do the hunting yourself, of sounds, of shadows, of meaning, until the world is nothing but things you must check twice. Somewhere in the city, someone's map had just gone silent too. Story 2, the coat check. No one saw who slipped the coin into Olivia Hawkins's coat pocket, because the restaurant was one of those subterranean London places where everyone pretends to be, discovered there by accident, and the cloakroom attendant had a smile that made you forgive queues and missing buttons. And anyway, the entire point of the night was to make Olivia forget about the court hearing and the old man with the bored judge who called what he did an unfortunate miscommunication, so her friend Maya ordered champagne as if bubbles could make amnesia, and they let the talk float, light as pastry air. The alert came while Olivia was walking alone to the bus stop, the night drizzle turning lamps into melted coins, and her phone vibrated with that indifferent language technology uses when it's trying to save you. An unknown item is moving with you. She stopped under a tree that hadn't learned not to drip-tap the alert and watched the map show a little circle that had shared her steps since 8:07 p.m. when she had draped her camel coat on a brass hook, turned and laughed at something Maya said about an actor's haircut and the crimes hair commits. And a stranger had been very efficient. She went cold and hot at once, a weather system churned by a finger-sized moon. And inside the pocket, her fingers found it immediately, because of course they did, because bodies become metal detectors when fear is the magnet. Thin tape slick against lining. A tiny hard circle nestled where you'd keep a mint. She didn't pull it out. She kept walking, steady, head down, and thought in double, one mind for her feet and the other for the thing inside her coat. And she remembered every article she'd saved after the hearing about women finding trackers under cars, in bags, in hoods, a galaxy of microplanets orbiting the same ugly sun. Olivia turned off the main road onto a residential street of Edwardian facades and hydrangeas with the soft arrogance of silk. And she chose a house with a camera above the door, just in case footage ever mattered. And she stopped at the gate and pretended to check her phone. And she took a photo of herself, then another, then one of the pavement, the lamplight, the house number, because documenting the ordinary is how you testify later. A car rolled up to the corner and two men looked up from the glow of their own phones with the bored entitlement of people who have never been afraid in their lives. They didn't smile. They didn't need to. Olivia walked again, turned left, then crossed, making her path both obvious and wrong, and the men didn't follow. But a silver hatchback she couldn't describe later because adrenaline erases license plates drifted past too slowly to be casual. When she reached the pub, she didn't go in. She stood under the awning with the smokers and the football, and she messaged Maya, "I'm being tracked." There was a short violence in the typing dots. And then Maya, blessed feral Maya, typed back, "Stay there, coming." Olivia considered pulling the device out and dropping it in a bin, but the thought tasted like throwing away. Fingerprints you might need, so instead she turned the sound on, and the coat emitted a chirp so small she wanted to apologize to it for making a scene. A man at the door looked over, laughed, and said, "New ringtone," and Olivia smiled, practiced. And as she did, Maya's black cab arrived like a summoned dragon, and she got in and said to the driver, "Police, please," and he didn't ask which, he just nodded, because London was an encyclopedia of this now. At the station, Sergeant Daniel Reeves took the coat with gloved hands and peeled the tape off like lifting a scab, and Olivia felt gratitude so sharp it was almost pain because someone else was touching the story for her. "Do you know who could have placed this?" he asked, gentle, and even the question made her ribs feel like too many doors. She told him about the hearing, about the man who had called her silence a misunderstanding for months, about the dismissal, the boring words that bury harm in paperwork, and Reeves said, "We'll check what we can," and she knew what we can had boundaries, and she felt rage at how tiny they were. They made a report. Maya's hand never left her shoulder, not once, and when Olivia finally slept, the phantom weight of the device stayed in the coat, hanged over a chair, like a new pocket that always held a stone. Over the next week, she found herself inventing rituals. Shake the coat, check the bag, scan the car, walk in reflections to see if there's a ghost where a person should be. She changed routes, time, patterns, and understood that monsters prefer calendars. When the call came that the device had been registered once to a name she recognized only from a private investigator directory, registered, deregistered, the trail neatly laundered, Reeves apologized for the limits. And Olivia thanked him for the effort, and when she hung up, she stood in her living room and said her name aloud until it sounded like someone else's. Then she took the coat to a tailor and had him sew the pocket shut with stitches like small iron rails. not because it would stop anyone, but because it felt like telling the world, no more rooms inside my clothes for strangers. The next time she went out, she didn't give her coat to anyone at all. Story 3. Home at the end of the route. The first time Mark Wells heard the sound, he thought it was a cricket trapped under the SUV, a patient ticking that matched speed bumps with tiny applause. But by the time he pulled into the driveway of the semi-detached they'd bought for the school catchment, the sound stopped. And he dismissed it like you dismiss the idea that the horizon is closer than it looks. On the third night, though, when he, his wife Claire, and their son Jamie returned from the late showing of a children's film that believed the world could be saved by a song, the phone pinged with a polite cruelty. An unknown item is moving with you. Mark said nothing to Claire because he had the ridiculous male instinct to solve fear with silence, and because Jamie had fallen asleep in the back and his hair smelled like the butter that refuses to be called butter. He glanced at the map, saw the dot dancing on their street like a moth that knew their address, and suddenly the garage door looked like a mouth that was about to swallow them. He parked on the curb instead. Claire frowned but said nothing, tired, trusting, and Mark said, "Let me just check something," the way people say, "I'll be right back" in films when the music tells you they won't. He walked around the SUV with his phone in one hand and the torch in the other, bent to peer under bumpers, tapped wheel wells, and then the sound. It was definitely a sound now, not in his head, chirped from under the rear chassis where only someone who believed in persistence would look. He lay down on cold pavement and saw it, silver white and smug, taped near the spare tire. He didn't touch it. Instead, he looked up and down the street. 2 houses down, a parked van idled with its lights off, the kind of patience engines have when they're paid by the hour. A shape shifted in the driver's seat, and the van's parking lights blinked once, as if clearing its throat. Mark stood, smiled a nothing smile meant for strangers, and then he made the worst good decision of the week. He waved at the van as if this were normal, as if neighbors sometimes sat motionless in vans at midnight like gargoyles on furlough. The van pulled away, slow like syrup, rethinking its options. Inside, Claire, who knew his face like music, said, "What?" And he said, "Into the house now, because there are nights when honesty is better than bravery." They locked the door. He turned off the marquee of their normal life, lamps, hall light, aquarium that made their living room look like an apology to fish, and they sat at the bottom of the stairs while he explained the device, the map, the van, the pattern. Claire's mouth did the math and arrived at anger first. "Jamie's school route, the Saturday shop, the runs you post on Instagram." Mark nodded like a defendant. They called 999, and the operator's voice had the smooth competence of a person who files chaos into folders. "Stay inside, do not remove the item. Officers en route." Waiting made the minutes heavy. Jamie breathed upstairs in the particular rhythm of children, and every creak in the house promoted itself to threat. 10 minutes became 20, and then headlights feathered their curtains, and 2 officers, PC Anita Chow and PC Gareth Lay, arrived with torches that made the world look selected. Outside, Chow crouched, played the sound, found the device, bagged it like a criminal butterfly. Lay canvassed the street, noted cameras, a doorbell's unblinking eye, the van's absence. "We've had a string of thefts," Chow said. "Trackers placed on vehicles," and then she didn't finish because endings are the most frightening parts. "We supply our own. Sometimes it's more." Inside, Claire's anger found a cousin. Shame that she'd posted Jamie at tournaments with their house number in the background, that she'd tagged locations like leaving breadcrumbs for wolves. "We'll take the device," Chow said. "See what it tells us." And the phrase made Mark want to apologize to an object. After they left, the house did not relax. The garage looked like a crime scene they were lucky not to have staged. At 3 a.m., Mark woke to a car rolling gently down the street and stood at the window, a diplomat negotiating with the dark. And he realized how quickly safety becomes a story you tell to go back to sleep. In the morning, he changed everything that could be changed: routes, routine, privacy settings, the way he checked the shadow under the SUV before turning the key. He told Jamie a version of the truth that made the world responsible but not monstrous. Jamie nodded solemnly and then asked if monsters hated broccoli, which was the mercy of being ate. A week later, Detective Sarah Winter called to say the device linked once to a generic account that paid for things with gift cards bought with cash, and the van, captured on a neighbor's doorbell, wore plates that belonged to a different car, and the shell game went on. "We've got patrols circling your area," she said, and the sentence was both aspirin and anecdote. That night, Mark parked 2 streets away, walked home with the device detector app humming on his phone like a tuning fork, and when he reached the front gate, he looked back down the quiet street and understood the final cruelty of small trackers. They don't just map where you are, they remap who you are. Someone who checks, who counts, Who watches the watchers? Someone who has learned the geometry of fear and performs it perfectly every time he leaves the house. He went inside, locked the door, kissed Claire in the hall like it was a ritual that could sanctify walls. And for the first time since the alert, he laughed, not because anything was funny, but because surviving sometimes sounds like that.